Just like last Monday, I was tempted to wait before making today's video, thinking that Big Ange may have lost one game too many for Daniel Levy's trigger finger. But Alistair Gould's club insiders tell him that his position is safe for now. So, with 1 week left of the transfer window, today I'm putting our embarrassing league form to one side and concentrating on the latest transfer talk coming out of the club. Levy has to open the purse strings now or there'll be riots next Tuesday. But who will want to come to a club where they'll not know whether the manager will still be in place in a week or 2 weeks' time? That is the bind that Daniel Levy has got himself in, and it's all his own fault. I'll be discussing who those names of players who could come in will be, as well as the rest of the Premier League transfer rumours on today's episode. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're on YouTube, please do press that like button. Please do subscribe. I'm getting so close now to 15,000 subscribers. Thanks so much for your support. It's such a great little community that we're building up together. So if you're not already a subscriber and you like daily Premier League transfer news, always starting, of course, with my team, the slightly embarrassing but beloved Tottenham Hotspur, please do press that subscribe button. But let's get started. And I will start with Alistair Gould because he's come out this morning and says that Tottenham are sticking with Ange Postecoglou amid the injury crisis his squad is engulfed in and will try to sign at least one player for him in the next week. The transfer window ends a week today, the 3rd of February. So, what can we expect realistically? Like I said, I just think Daniel Levy has got himself finally in a bind where all his chickens have come home to roost, basically. The lack of spending on wages, which of course he, I'm sure, would say privately is down to the amount that's been spent on the stadium, although publicly he says that the stadium money was ring-fenced and it wouldn't affect our transfer business, which years ago, of course, it did because he didn't invest in 2 transfer windows. And now he says, the loan deals we've got on the stadium debt, which is over £1 billion and makes us the most indebted club in world football. But Daniel Levy comes out in public and says that the interest rates we've got on that over the next 50 years are so good that it doesn't affect our ability to spend money on transfer fees or wages. However, we're currently in the middle of this painful rebuild, and by God is it painful, and he's not able to get players in. And right now he's in a position where we are in 15th in the league, about to go down to 16th maybe even further. And players are going to be looking at it and saying, well, your manager's under pressure. He might leave. He might be sacked after the Liverpool game, which is, 2-3 days after the end of the transfer window. So why am I going to come into your club? So where this makes a huge bind for Daniel Levy is that if he actually wants to get probably any players in the next week, he's going to have to pay them in wages and their clubs in transfer fees because they know what desperation Tottenham have. Far more than even he would be willing to do. And far more than the clubs would probably normally ask. So that's why I say it's all his chickens coming home to roost. Now, I do want to play a little bit of devil's advocate, which is obviously one of the big bits of abuse that Daniel Levy gets is that he sacks too many managers. And he sacks managers, Mourinho, for instance, before the cup final. Well, this time, those of you who say that and use that as a big stick to beat Daniel Levy with, surely you're getting what you want right now because Daniel Levy is not sacking Ange Postecoglou, and this is by far the worst form we've had in any time during Levy's reign. Maybe other than 2 points in 8 games under Juan de Ramos, but he sacked him after 8 games. Nuno hadn't had a shot on target for 5 games or something, so he sacked him. But this time he's listening to you. He is listening. Daniel Levy is listening to the social media clamour that's been going on for years saying that he sacks managers too early. So how do you feel about that? If you're one of those people who has said and abused Daniel Levy for having sacked managers too early and sacked good managers, do you feel like he's doing the right thing now by keeping with Ange Postecoglou? And therefore, do you have to somehow give him some credit for that? I doubt you will be giving him credit for that because you're so angry that he's not spending any money this window. But I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I think, yes, of course he has to spend money, but I don't think players are wanting to come at the moment because Tottenham are in such a hole. It's a really difficult position, and the pressure on that game at Anfield next week is just going to be unbelievably huge. And of course, I think if he loses that game, over the 2 legs, if he's out, if Tottenham are out and Ange loses and we don't go into the final, he'll get sacked, won't he? Surely he'll get sacked. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Anyway, back to the transfer talk. David Ornstein came out and said he's keeping an eye on Tottenham in the final days of this transfer window. He said this: in attack and in defence, they would like to strengthen if they can. Initially, it sounded like they would do some loans after the arrival of the goalkeeper Kinski, but maybe they even look to go down the permanent route now that they're struggling so badly with injuries and struggling so badly in the Premier League. That was on the Athletics YouTube channel. Also, it came out that Spurs saw bringing in a new forward this month as a priority even before Dominic Solanke's injury. But their league position and salary structure have made it difficult to attract the calibre of player they want. This is something that came out on Friday. And this sent the Spurs fan base into meltdown because it's almost like by it coming out in public that Tottenham have a salary structure, they're like, well, there's the problem. You know, we don't spend all the money that everyone else spends. Well, that's true. But I'll go back to it again, and I'm sorry, but you have to take everything into consideration. When Arsenal moved into the Emirates in 2006, they didn't spend any money at all, and they were selling players every year until 2013 when they brought in Mesut Ozil. That was the first time where they broke their tight wage structure and spent a lot of money. And then they didn't really start properly spending money until, I think it was 2018, 2019, when Nicola Pepe came in for £75 million. So 2006 to 2013 is 7 years. We moved into the stadium in 2019. So now we're into our 6th year. So I know we've got all this revenue, but if you look at how it goes when clubs move into big stadiums and take on a lot of debt, and bear in mind that Arsenal had the money from the Emirates deal then as well, and we don't have any money from a stadium sponsorship deal, but we have revenue from other things like the NFL, like the go-karting, like the concerts, etc. But it does take time. I'm sorry, I'm not using it as an excuse for Levy. I'm really not. But that has to be taken into consideration when you think about why Tottenham are not able to spend huge amounts of money on wages or are unwilling to. And actually, when you look at the amount of money we've spent in the last 5, 6, 7 transfer windows, it's up there in the top 4 of clubs, top 4 or 5. So it's a difficult one. And going back to what the journalists have said about Tottenham trying to sign a forward, but the league position affecting the players we can get in, that's exactly what I said at the top. You know, Daniel Levy has got himself in a bind of his own making that is incredibly hard to get out of, because if in a week's time we haven't brought a forward in or a defender in, there are going to be like massive proper protests outside the stadium. Like, I'm going to say riots, not riots, but not physically, but like the fan base is getting riotous in their opinions. And so he's going to have to basically offer a player who doesn't want to come to the club so much wages. Let's say, as an example, it's an Eberechi Eze at Crystal Palace. He would have to go to Crystal Palace and say, I will offer you £20 million more than your valuation of that player because we need him so badly, to even get them to the table. And then he's going to have to say to Eze, who's going to say, well, you're in a relegation scrap and your manager might get sacked in a week's time. You're going to have to go to him and say, well, we'll offer you £15,000 more a week than you initially asked. And that's where Levy's in the bind, because he doesn't want to do it. He's never done it before. He won't do it. And therefore, we're not going to have any players through the door probably, are we? And then Postecoglou isn't going to have enough players to play against Liverpool. We're going to lose that game 3 or 4-0. Then Postecoglou gets the sack. And then which manager's going to want to come? I mean, there's never been a bind for Daniel Levy like it. And I'm going to ask you guys a question to get into me in the comments, because this is something I'd be intrigued at. Anyone who is able to think in their right mind right now and try and put themselves in Daniel Levy's shoes, is there a way he can get out of this at the moment? Like with his head held high, is there a way he can regain some credibility amongst the fan base in the next week? I'm talking about short term. What can he do? What can he actually do? And take into account what I just said and what that journalist report said about how the forwards that they're interested in don't want to come. What can Levy actually do? Or is this just a sinking ship now? Like, how bad can it get? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Really intrigued to know. Moving on. Tottenham remain apparently in very concrete talks with Tyler Dibbling from Southampton's management over a potential transfer. This is from Plettigol, the respected journalist over in Germany, Sky Sports Germany. And that is because RB Leipzig are also desperate to sign the Southampton forward. He's a very talented young player. He's been on our list. And now, if we're in a little fight with Leipzig, maybe Tyler Dibbling will look at that and say, well, look, Southampton are going down, so I've got to think about my next move. If I go to somewhere like Leipzig, I'll be in the team every single game. Where I go to Spurs, once they get some of their players back, maybe it would be a bit of a fight for me to get in the team. Although I think probably he'd have a good chance of taking Brennan Johnson's place in the right forward line. Let me know what you think about Tyler Dibbling. According to Jacob Steenberg, another reputable journalist, Spurs, one of the clubs interested in Evan Ferguson. Should he be allowed to leave on loan? Evan Ferguson, talk of the town, talk of the Premier League about a year, 18 months ago, but he's really dropped off a cliff. I don't know if that's down to injuries or maybe an attitude problem, believing his own hype. But Spurs interested in him should he come on loan. That seems like a bit of a no-brainer, but he can't get in the Brighton team. So, will he come to Spurs and be motivated to try and get in our team and fight Richarlison for a number 9 place whilst Solanke's out injured? I do not know. Another player that Spurs have been interested in, obviously, Matheus Cunha from Wolves. Aston Villa have now joined the chase for him, alongside Nottingham Forest, Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs and Manchester United. I mean, you'd have to think Cunha, if he's going to leave Wolves this window, 25 years old, having an amazing season for them, why would he come to Spurs over some of those clubs? This is a perfect example of what I've been saying, actually, isn't it? Maybe, what could Levy and Big Ange say to Cunha? You could say, well, you probably won't get in the team for Arsenal for very long because Saka will come back. But maybe you can take Martinelli's place and maybe that would be his big temptation. Chelsea have so many forwards. Forest, do you really want to go there? But what I'm talking about is if they really wanted Cunha, they're going to have to go to Wolves and offer them £20 million more than anyone else does and say to Cunha, if you want to take a risk and come here, we're going to offer you 25 grand a week more than you actually want. And Daniel Levy's not going to do that. So do I think Cunha's going to come through to Tottenham this week? No. I don't think it's likely. A rumour that came out this weekend that maybe does seem a bit more realistic. Spurs have been working on a potential deal for Rangers striker Hamza Igamane in recent weeks. He joined Rangers in the summer. He's had a really good start to his career there. And you can see the Scottish market as somewhere where Tottenham could persuade a player to come from a top club over there, Rangers, to the Premier League, because that's why players go to clubs like Rangers these days, as a stepping stone to the Premier League. So maybe that is a kind of deal that could be more likely. But again, hard to know whether he's going to bounce straight from doing well in the Scottish Premier League to the actual Premier League in England, because the standard is just so different. Here was a transfer rumour that came out the back end of last week and over the weekend that excited me. Timo Werner talking to New York Red Bulls in the MLS about a potential deal. I think for you, Timo, and for Spurs and for Leipzig, your home club, that would be a good deal. Take it. Go and rebuild your confidence in a league where the standard isn't as good. You can be one of the main men over there and have a good standard of life. I like you as a man, Timo. I think you're a good bloke, but it's not. It's not a thing. A rumour came out on Friday, late Friday, that Spurs were considering joining West Ham in having an approach for Ajax's Brian Brobby. They've investigated that possibility. That's according to Paul O'Keefe. Then Fabrizio Romano came out and said that Tottenham have asked Ajax over some loan conditions. Then Michael Bridge from Sky Sports kind of put an end to it, and I'm kind of thankful for that. Said Spurs want a forward, and there's been talk about Spurs entering the race for Brian Brobby at Ajax, but my understanding is that's not the case. I actually spoke to my friend Mick Johan, who is a legend. He's an artist over in Holland, supports Ajax, big football fan, knows his stuff. I asked him about Brian Brobby, and he says he's gutted for him because he's such a talent, but he's just had a terrible year. I think he scored 1 goal in something like 18 Eredivisie games. And he's a real talent, but he cannot put the ball in the net. And frankly, for Spurs right now, do we need another signing who's lacking in confidence like Timo Werner? No, we do not. So that is one I'm pleased that Michael Bridge at Sky Sports said that is not someone on Tottenham's list at the moment. Angel Gomez over in Lille is someone on Spurs' list, and he has said, I'm aware of clubs inquiring about my situation, but I'm completely focused on Lille. I want to finish the season in the best way possible, and then we'll see what happens. I'm focused on the present and not on negotiations. Well, Angel Gomez is one of those players. He's the number 6, obviously, England international now, ex-Manchester United. One of those players who's out of contract in the summer, but it's gone too far for Tottenham now. We cannot be concentrating on the out-of-contract players in the summer to bring in the summer. We cannot. We need players who can come in now, and therefore they should be going to those clubs like Lille and saying, we will offer you £15 million for the player who's going to leave on a free in the summer if we can take him now. Maybe even £20 million. Do what Inter Milan did to Spurs when they got Christian Eriksen from us 6 months early. They gave us £17 million. Go to Lille. If you think Angel Gomez is the right player for the number 6 role, who will bring us some stability and sturdiness. For me, I worry about his physicality, but that's by the by. If Ange thinks he's the right man, then Levy, this is a good example. Open the purse strings, get him in. Someone who the club will want to get some money for, do it. And you're going to have to offer him a lot of money as well as a signing on fee, because if he goes in summer for free, he'll get a huge signing on fee. So you'll have to tempt the player as well. Levy, this is the bind you're in. You've got yourself in it. You're going to have to get yourself out of it. Ange Postecoglou, this was before, in fact, the defeat against Leicester. He was asked about the need for further additions. He said, there's still no doubt we need to help these players as we've got some significant games before we get the injured players back. Again, another message to the board. We need help. We need help. We need help. Interesting interview talking about Jeff Scott. This was in The Athletic, who was the former Spurs head of medicine and sports science. And obviously there's a lot of talk at the moment about all the injuries at Spurs and who is to blame. I've been quite single-minded in saying that I think Ange has to take some of the blame. Obviously the medical side have to take some of the blame too, and the board have to take a lot of the blame too for not giving us a strong enough squad. But, you know, playing a little bit of devil's advocate with them, we got loads of players out this summer, and we all wanted, as the fan base, we all knew the players we wanted to leave the club because we didn't think they suited Ange's style. So we got like 11 or 12 out the door, and it's impossible basically to get 11 or 12 through the door. But that's why we need to replenish the squad this January. But anyway, talking about Jeff Scott, the former head of medicine and sports science, apparently he left the club after clashing with Ange Postecoglou. Although the club insists that Scott's departure did not involve Big Ange, sources with knowledge of the situation who asked to remain anonymous to protect relationships say that the pair fell out over how to manage the first team squad's workload and the recovery of injured players. So clearly Scott has spoken to The Athletic, or people who are on Scott's side have spoken to The Athletic and said Ange works them too hard. He brings players back from injury too soon. He takes risks on them. That is what I'm reading into that situation. Let me know in the comments if you think differently. Am I reading it wrongly? And if I'm reading it wrongly, how can I possibly be reading it wrongly? Because it just doesn't sound to me like Jeff Scott was saying, bring the players back early, and Ange was saying no, because we've all seen Ange bring players back early and them get re-injured. So it sounds like Jeff Scott was a little too pragmatic for Big Ange. And for me, that is one of Big Ange's big problems. And why he may end up losing his job for Spurs, because we don't get enough first-team players on the pitch. He takes too many risks with them. He drives them into the ground. I love him. I'll say it again. I want it to work for Big Ange Postecoglou. There's nothing I'd like more than it to work for Big Ange Postecoglou. But these are the reasons, some of the reasons why he is in big, big trouble. Some more stuff from that article in The Athletic. Sources familiar with the situation, who again asked to remain anonymous to protect relationships, say that the medical staff had reservations about Mickey van der Ven's readiness to play in the game against Chelsea, but nevertheless, he started the match. The club insisted he was ready, but the plan had been to only play him for about an hour. Due to circumstances in the match, he ended up playing for 79 minutes and he got re-injured, walked off the pitch in tears. Okay, I mean, I've said everything I've got to say on that. Like I said, get in the comments, tell me how you feel about it. Some more positive news. The hope is that Romero and Van der Ven will resume full training this week. We saw some social media clips at the back end of last week. They are back in training, but full training this week, which could put them in contention for Brentford away next weekend, and then Liverpool in the second leg of the Carabao Cup 4 days later. Does a week of full training sound enough to you for players who've been out for 2 months? It does not to me. Are we again going to put ourselves in the position where we're going to bring Romero and Van der Ven back for that Liverpool game, a game that is going to be of the utmost intensity, and then they're going to get re-injured? That is my fear. That is my fear. It's a risk. Oh, God. Anyway, like you can tell, I'm kind of speechless at the thought of it, but I just hope he gets it right this time. Some more positivity. Wilson Odobes should return to training in early February. Well, that's next week. God, do we need some pace in this team. We're so one-paced at the moment. That is according to L'Équipe in France, so another reputable source. Meanwhile, according to Paul O'Keefe, Destiny Udogie is on track to return in just over 3 weeks, so that could be some more good news. Can we find a way to win that game against Liverpool and then have all of our players back for the final? Let's see what happens. And then the Deloitte Football Money League report came out, and it's not good reading for Daniel Levy. Spurs' wage bill was down to just 42% of the revenue of £220 million, despite the club earning higher commercial revenue than either Chelsea or Arsenal. Well, I'm not even going to use Chelsea or Arsenal as the kind of example of this. Aston Villa's revenue of wages to revenue was 98%, and Spurs is 42%. And we are right slap bang in the middle right now of a transferal of power between Aston Villa and Tottenham Hotspur, because Aston Villa's owners have been more willing to take risks and to spend more money to get to a position where they are now a Champions League club and we are not, and they're pushing for the Champions League again. And I don't know how in the boardroom, Daniel Levy and Donna Marie Cullen and all of those people, I don't know how they defend that to each other. I don't know how they justify it to each other. We shouldn't be looking at clubs like Aston Villa, who were relegated. They were in the Championship a few years ago, and seeing them above us. Bournemouth, 16 points above Tottenham Hotspur at the moment. I don't know how we justify it. I really don't. Final bit of Spurs news before I go into some more wide-ranging Premier League transfer news. Apparently, according to Tom Allnut late last week, he came out and said that Richarlison is seen as a complicated character with whom coaches have found it difficult to engage during his time at Spurs. Well, he got his goal at the weekend. He was taken off early, which, got a big booing in the stadium, but we're managing his minutes. I understand it. Frankly, we need him to start at Anfield. We're going to need someone who can hold the ball up in the final third, so we have to manage his minutes, but yeah, that's not great news coming out from Spurs. Before I go on to that more wide-ranging Premier League transfer talk, guys, once again, thank you so much for your support. Please do press like on this video. The more likes I get, the more Spurs fans and Premier League fans this gets seen by. And also, like I said, I'm so close to 15,000 subscribers now. If you could press subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. I'm building a great community here. Help get me to that 15,000 mark. And yeah, just get in the comments, guys. I love chatting with you guys. I love reading all of your comments. Okay, let's start at Old Trafford, because they are busy. They got a lucky win away at Fulham yesterday, so they seem to be keen not to be in a relegation battle like Spurs. That's pretty boring of them. But Chelsea set to approach Man United again for Alejandro Garnacho. Napoli remain keen, but no agreement on €50 million package that Manchester United are looking for a bit more than. Chelsea spoke to Alejandro Garnacho's camp and will now try and agree a deal with United. United still said to be heavily interested in the signing of Christopher Nkunku. That's according to Florian Plettenberg over there in Germany. United and Chelsea held initial talks about those separate deals, according to Fabrizio Romano, at the end of December, but nothing is concrete at the moment. Over to Man City. They're interested in spending again. The only club who have really massively opened their purse strings in the Premier League this window. They bought 3 players and they're looking again at Italian fullback Andrea Cambiaso, 24 years old, and Juventus want a fee of €65 million, which is just over £54 million. Chelsea also interested in Moroccan midfielder Reda Belayani from Verona in Italy. That's according to Gianluca Di Marzio. They also are willing to sell, as we know, Ben Chilwell, 28 years old now. Dortmund are looking at him. Over to Aston Villa, and here's one that's relevant to Spurs fans. Villa are massively interested and are in talks to sign Juan Foyth. The initial proposal has been sent to Villarreal, and Unai Emery obviously worked with him previously. And that is, again, another example of the transference between of Spurs and Villa turning into one another. Juan Foyth was a Spurs player and actually, frankly, would be a player at Spurs now, or a player who Spurs could do with now. A versatile centre-half who can also play at full-back, who's really good on the ball. But we let him go, and now it looks like he's going to go to Aston Villa. Chelsea's French centre-back Axel Disasi is also a target for Aston Villa. This is what happens when you get in the Champions League and you're chasing for Champions League again. You can open your purse strings more, and that is why Levy is not, because we haven't got in the Champions League for the last few years. And Villa overtaking us. They're also interested in Besiktas forward Semi Kilishoy before the end of the transfer window. As well as Loic Barde from Sevilla potentially, after Villa let Brazilian defender Diego Carlos join Fenerbahce last week. Over to Newcastle, they're still interested in James Trafford from Burnley, and as I mentioned earlier, Mateus Cunha. Everton are eyeing a cut price deal for Southampton's fullback Carl Walker-Peters, another player that was potentially on Spurs' list because he's a homegrown player for Spurs, an academy player, and his contract runs out in the summer. We need some fullback cover. Would you like Kyle Walker-Peters at Spurs? Southampton were also approached by Galatasaray about Kyle Walker-Peters. Wolves retain a strong interest in signing Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis, who Spurs have an option to sign in the summer for 25 million euros. Is he another player that Spurs should be spending money on now rather than waiting for the summer? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Okay guys, a bit of a difficult video today again, obviously after another defeat, but thank you again for your support. Do press the like button if you haven't. Please do subscribe, help me get to that 15,000 subscribers, and you can listen on the podcast platforms too. Actually, even if you just watch on YouTube, it would really help me if you go over and give me a follow or subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Really helps support me, guys. Just type in the Spurred On podcast and give me a follow, subscribe, and a rating over there. Try and enjoy your Monday if you can. I know it's tough.